Hello, everybody. And my name is Charles, for those of you who don't know me. And those of you who do know me know that I'm a filmmaker, film critic, and academic, and whatever. And today I'm going to talk about what's going to seem like a fairly strange topic, but bear with me. And as I mentioned, yes, I have an academic career in film studies. And one of the things that strikes me is how people tend to overlook the cinematic aspect of direct address video and streaming a la Zoom calls. That's what I'd like to focus on right now. And you may be wondering why. Well, part of my expertise as a critic and filmmaker is in the subfield of production design, which is the overall look of a movie, not the cinematography, but just the what is shown, how it's shown, etc. And that's what I find so fascinating in relation to direct address and streaming. Now, I've been at YouTube for a long time. I'm not in the very first, but I think like 2006. And one of the things that's true of the earliest direct-addressed videos, and indeed some of them still today, including this one, is that they're fairly rough in that it was more or less people just talking directly to the camera about whatever subject interested them. And I can remember in the early days, at least, some people thought that my stuff was just a little more formal than average because I did take a little bit extra care in camera placement and lighting and so on. Today, that is obviously not the case, that the direct address format has become almost hyper professionalized, certainly among the heavy hitters at YouTube and other places. And so there's been a gradual evolution. Now, the interesting thing about streaming, or I'm going to say Zoom calls just as an easier way to include what I'm talking about, is that they are in effect like the early days of direct address video in the sense that it's people just talking straight to the camera with not too much concern about the way they look or the way the surroundings look, and it's more or less just purely informational. But that too is changing, if you haven't noticed, that both the average YouTube video and direct address phone calls or Zoom calls, there's more and more of an emphasis on the background, on the, for lack of a better term, the design around the speaker. Now, why is this an issue? Well, a great deal of effort and expense goes into the production design on the average film because the filmmakers are constructing a world through the objects and spaces that they create. And so in order to convince the viewer that they are in that space, they have to spend a lot of time creating it, thinking a lot about what to include and what to exclude. Now, that is obviously not true of the average Zoom call. But it's becoming more so. And I wonder how many people have noticed this, that yes, it's true people still are more or less recording from their personal spaces, but partly thanks to COVID and people spending more time at home doing work from home, the boundary between professional space and personal space is being smudged, not just in terms of people's lives, but in terms of the way people talk. And we all know the notorious stories of people getting caught in Zoom calls doing things they wouldn't normally think to do because they forget they're in front of a camera. Well, I think we're past that point. I think at this point, most people are very aware that they're in front of a camera, even if they're only in a phone call or a Zoom call or whatever you want to call it. So why do I mention this? Well, because there's consequence. Part of it is that, as I mentioned about early direct address, whatever you might say about those early YouTube videos, they were very sincere. They're very to the point about whatever it was that the people wanted to talk about. And then they've become glossier and more professional, more focused, etc. Well, as Zoom calls become more self-conscious as people worry about their background. And of course, it is now possible to put in a digital background or an AI background. It's becoming more and more of a fashion statement. Just as people are concerned about what they wear in the morning, they're getting more and more concerned about how they present themselves on camera. And it's in effect turning all of us into shills, even if we're not necessarily selling a particular product. And of course, many people are. But even if you're not, there's still the idea of dressing things up so that they're better than the raw reality of just recording a statement, recording a call. And I think that's kind of unfortunate because one of the consequences is that what could have been, and certainly was in the early days of YouTube, a very expressive medium is turning into yet another form of commercial. and it's turning all of our lives into commercials. And so as much as I respect production design as a discipline, and as much as I'm a participant in it in many ways, I think people have to recognize how much of a coded message is contained in these supposedly neutral spaces. Now, there are obvious things like, as you look at me right now, you can see that I have movie posters on the wall, etc. All right, so obviously that expresses some kind of interest in particular films, but you shouldn't take that too far, because I'm not revealing too much to say, although yes, I have these posters on the wall. They aren't necessarily my favorite films of all time. They're more because I like them as posters. So that is a different aspect of my personality, which doesn't necessarily come through in the direct message of the image. But at the same time, every image, every cinematic image has this coded message that the people in it may not even be aware of themselves, but they are revealing things about themselves through their tastes, through their choice of what to talk about, certainly, but also even the way they say it or what they don't say. And so all of that's part of what I call the unconscious meaning of the image. And I will leave it at that to give people some thought about their own presentation. And I want to end by emphasizing I'm not trying to make everyone paranoid about the way they present themselves on camera. If anything, I actually encourage people to feel comfortable in front of the camera. But you do have to be aware of just how much you are revealing about yourself, not just in the obvious ways, but in other ways, because only with that awareness can you move intelligently through the forest of commodities that our lives have become.